yes, I'm Beth Scott from the University of Aberdeen, and as someone who you've seen has been involved in a couple of these renewables projects, I'm also someone who's been involved heavily in issues of marine protected areas. So I thought I'd take a bit of a wider perspective and look at strategic ecological research directions. If you're wondering, why do I have a picture of terrestrial habitat up here? The reason is this is a delta area. Deltas are one of our most fertile habitats on the terrestrial world, and yet I think you can see by this picture, it's completely used by human habitation. So my point is, can we be a little bit more intelligent in the marine world than we have been on the terrestrial world in terms of using our productive habitat? Because the point there is that our shelf sea areas that are usually less than 100 kilometers away from the coast, less than 200 meters deep, only 7.5% of our oceans, that's where 50% of our fish are landing from. These are our productive areas, and of course this is where we're going to put in all kinds of renewables and other offshore structures. So my point is, I think what we really should be doing now, we're all really good ecologists and oceanographers and all kinds of other types of ologies. We should be carefully looking at population level issues, and we should be looking at ecosystem cumulative impacts of these offshore activities. We should be doing it now and having a backwards look at what we really should be doing now. So simply, these are our high energy areas. The simple questions would be, do we have lots of animals in these areas as is predicted? Of course, you all know the answer to that question, which is yes, indeed. So for being very UK-centric, here's a map that is used out of our national data sets from grey seals and harbour seals on their usage map. Here's a map from an atlas that's made again from national data sets, and down below the inset here is what's called our scan surveys, where you get a month-long scan surveys continuously around the coast for mammals, and this is a harbour porpoise, and these are 10 years apart, and there's another one due next year. It shows this incredible variability in their distribution. Here's a map from our JNCC. The database is called the European Seabirds at Sea data that's been alluded to a few times. These are density maps made up in 30 years. Yes, we know where birds are in high densities, different breeding seasons, different types of species, lots of them using a lot of high energy areas. And let's not forget our fish. So a picture of our fisheries here using VMS data all around our coast, showing actually lots of fish in these areas as well. So, really easy answer, yes, absolutely. Our animals, lots of what's going on in our coast as predicted. But I wanted to note here, one of the reasons I did this is to show you that all this data came from national databases. This data does not come from hundreds of EIAs that have been done. We've got to ask ourselves the question, where is that EIA data going? Are we making any use of it? So, and I think this is nice, those of you that were here on Tuesday, luckily I've made these slides up before so I can feel quite vindicated that yes indeed, what we really need to know now is what are animals doing in these locations. We know animals are here, we've got to move on and look at our research in terms of what will change. Will that change affect the behavior of animals in any significant way? Meaning, will that change in behavior affect the vital rates of populations in that way? And a sticky problem is actually, even with all that information, we're still having a hard time defining what's a population. So what types of field data are really rapidly increasing our knowledge? Because we are in a context where we need to do this quickly. And what I suggest, and it's a word that came up in the workshop, but hypothesis-driven studies. Those studies, I think you've seen the range of studies that have been put up here that are hypothesis-driven, that look at the individual and the population level model, come up with some certainties at the end, come up with some information that you can use. And why they work so well is because if you use an iterative approach of modeling and empirical fieldwork, is that you can identify the sensitive parameters, so you design your fieldwork, how to collect those information and those parameter values at the right frequency. This is really important, with enough power to do proper statistical analysis. So, what I'd say is, stepping out of that big scale, is that we really need to link some of these issues into population and even ecosystem models, and look at, as some of the wonderful physical talks this afternoon have alluded, all these things are going to change the physics. We're going to be extracting energy with our tidal and wave. we possibly are putting energy in with all our wind farms and all the wind farm killers causing more mixing. So we're changing mixing. And as, again, the physicists have alluded, it doesn't take a whole lot of change to make some big changes up the trophic chain, because, as you know, mixing drives primary production. So I'm alluding to ecosystem-based models down here that we really should be thinking about. And the other major point, and I think I've only heard this in one talk, is climate change. We're all here, as ecologists at least, I think, that's saying that we think climate change is definitely the worst enemy out there. It's a really bad thing if we just keep letting it go. We should be putting our research in the context of how bad it could get without renewables. So what I have here is a very simple idea. We're looking at ecological change over time, and without renewables, that ecological change could be really rapid and very high, and possibly with renewables, it's still going to go up. Climate change isn't going to go away, but the difference between them is what we should be emphasizing. We shouldn't be talking just about the fact of what renewables might do. It's what might happen if we don't have renewables. We should also be focusing. Okay, and then coming down into the scales, what I would suggest that works the best is individually based models, and I think we've seen this a lot, but mechanistic models, mechanistic behavior models in particular, so that you can really explore from an individual's behavioral changes what happens at the population level. So an example I'm putting up is an energetics model that's just been published about breeding birds, and I admit to saying yes, it's part of that one, so I wouldn't get up possibly, but I do think it's a very, very good example. In this model, we're basically showing how a bird in different conditions, climate conditions, what I'm calling climate conditions, good amounts of prey for them to eat, or poor amounts of prey, showing with real data in an area we're all familiar with now, how far that bird can forage and successfully breed, at the rate at which it successfully breeds in these concentric circles of lower and lower breeding success as you go out. And what it shows that in good prey years, these birds can travel quite good distances, and these distances map very well with real data. But in poor years, they're much more constrained to, if they're going to breed successfully, they actually have to capture food much closer to home. And that means in poor years is when they might interact in a negative way if renewable devices are somehow blocking their ability to catch their prey. So it's these kinds of models that can give us immediate answers as to how important where things are in the water and what they're doing. Now looking around the web, and I finally got to meet Gail, and all this fantastic stuff that's going on where they're doing kind of the same thing with fish, and looking and linking the behavior of fish, and being able to link it to hydrodynamics. So I'm really looking for that stuff coming out. And the rest of you can please have more of this. The other things that are really, really working well, and we've seen some fantastic examples today, tagging animals, tagging individuals, incredible rapid learning. We find out what they're doing, we find out where they're doing it, we find out how long we're doing it. So here I'm showing some examples of the FAME project, which is a European project that the RSPB are running, that has now put on hundreds and hundreds of GPS tags, quite cheap ones, we lose a lot. But they're finding all these incredible foraging areas that are quite consistent, and some long-term studies, farther studies as well. But also the seals. The seals are absolutely fantastic in the sense that we can now see these ideas of exactly that which parts they're traveling and which parts they're actually foraging in. Rapid learning of what's going on. And then, sorry to repeat, but this idea of intensive frequency surveys, meaning you don't have to do them all the time, but do them very intensively when you do them in contrasting seasons, and please, don't just look at the behavior, take the physics. Okay, so that we can get to these models, we have predictive models about what the physics means in terms of these behaviors. So in this case, I'm showing James's stuff here, puffin use, and the idea that speed, tidal speed, and eddy viscosity, i.e. turbulence proxy, is what's driving where these things are foraging. Now that allows us to really move rapidly and think about when we put the turbines in there or when the turbines are running, what this might mean to their foraging. Another one that we've been doing is working with BRI and Glasgow and putting together using these same types of methodologies and the same high-frequency surveys, so we can compare a whole bunch of different sites. These are all with vantage points. We're not on boats. These are very cheap, relatively speaking, to do. And again, by doing the same methodologies and having a lot of power in our statistics to be able to compare across sites, we can show that speed of the tide, and well, the speed plus the habitat, the interaction between the two is a variable that always comes up. So the same species may use flood tides in one area and use an ebb tides in another area, but actually the interaction, the type of habitat, and the type of level of speed they're using, that's the commonality that's coming through. So, and then you're going to hear, you've heard some about this, hopefully you'll hear a bit more tomorrow, this idea of how do we move forward with all of the different types of really good technical devices we can use. So this idea of active acoustic tracking by putting something on a frame and putting it down somewhere, adding passive acoustics to that, and the idea that you don't just detect the detection of animals that make noise, but you also can put pingers on animals, this idea that we can put really cheap little pingers on some of the bird species, and also be trying to detect them with passive acoustics. But this idea of triggering cameras, and I got these great pictures when Brian was testing this when I went out to visit last year. So the outcome is this idea of a collection of workable amount of data in real time, and that you can do that over extended periods of time, and that hopefully these sort of experimental setups we can get to very rapidly in the next few years. And then we move on to the pods that are top of the mountain, the types of instruments that we've decided are the best to do this the best. That's so what I wanted to make a few other points is globally shared database. Now you saw from Andrea's talks during the workshops, the basis, I'm saying that right, thesis, sorry, you know, excellent one-stop shop to see where all the renewables work is going, but also what we really need now is the actual data. We need that data, and what I was trying to put up here by putting all these is, let's think about how maybe we can put a flag on data that can be used as renewables type research quite easily in our other types of databases where the actual data is there to download, like location-based data in our oceanographic sites, species-based data like in our JNCC sites where we actually have population variables within those databases as well, and the tagging web pages that have fantastic data you can download in Google Earth and stuff, that we can flag renewables data in these databases. That might make life a lot faster in terms of searching. And last but not least, communities and stakeholders. Now, we had a little bit of a session the first day about this, and I think as someone who's now lived through a couple of these projects, absolutely, what we really need to learn, both sides need to learn, is what sort of information, what do stakeholders, so from the academics' point of view, what do stakeholders really want and need, but really what kind of joint interaction, or what kind of interaction will lead to joint understanding. We do need to do a bit more of that, finding out and working together a bit and learning what the two systems, how we can better talk together. So finally, what I will do is conclude. Basically, we need to understand at the mechanistic level what animals are doing in high energy sites. We need to focus on hypothesis-driven data collection that feeds critical sensitivity parameter estimates into individual population and ecosystem models. We need to consider the wider cumulative effects, combinations of offshore energy developments, and compare that in relation to climate change. And we need to work together at data sharing and understanding the needs of an entire range of stakeholders.
Thank you, Beth. I will allow one quick question, I think, if anybody's got a burning question. Otherwise, we'll move along then. And the next talk is Sarah.